You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
No excuses. None. J.J. Starling, Syracuse Basketball's best player. He's been out for over a month, if you recall, because he broke his left hand in practice the day before the Tennessee game, which was on December 3rd. He's back. No limitations either, at least from my eye test. I didn't see any laboring on the floor or anything different. I could be wrong. Maybe. Maybe he's still, I guess I'll say he might have been rusty, and that's about it. But he was back, and he was starting, and he played a good number of minutes in this one. Played 32 minutes. That's about what he usually plays. So he's back. So there goes that excuse that J.J. Starling is gone. Chris Bell. I've criticized Chris Bell a lot here on this podcast. And it's been fair criticism. Chris Bell, prior to tonight, had not hit a single three-pointer since that Tennessee game. It's been a long time. It's been over a month. But tonight, you know what, Chris Bell? I'm not really going to criticize him. There's nothing to criticize. Adrian Autry had him come off the bench for this game and said he had Lucas Taylor start the game. So that was a lineup change right there. And Chris Bell played 22 minutes. And in those 22 minutes, he led the team in scoring. He had 18 points in only 5 field goal attempts, and he was 4 of 4 from three-point. Say what you want about Chris Bell. And look, I understand that he had no rebounds. He had no assists. He's not a great defender. I get it. But when Chris Bell gives you 18 points and he's 4 of 4 from 3, you're going to take that, right? That's what we at least want from Chris Bell. At minimum, that's what we want. So there goes that excuse. You got Chris Bell hot. You got J.J. Starling back in the lineup. Kyle Cuff, once again, he gives you more than what you can really ask for from him. Again, sorry, if you catch my eyes drifting, it's because I pull up the stats here on my computer as I record this podcast. Kyle Cuff finished with 10 points in 14 minutes. Kyle Cuff, again. At this point, I'm not even really surprised because he's actually played pretty well. And finally, Florida State. And if you're a Florida State fan stumbling upon this podcast, I really don't mean this with any disrespect. I just want to point out how absurd it is that Syracuse basketball lost this game by 16 points and got completely run off the floor in the second half. Florida State heading into this game was 82nd in the net rankings. That's not very good. Now, Syracuse is a lot worse. They were 159, and I imagine they're going to go even lower after this one. But Florida State's 82nd. That's not great. I know they have a good record, but prior to tonight, they had 0 power conference wins. None. And yet Syracuse loses this game by 16 points. They get crushed in the second half. There are no excuses. None. You can't say the team was too good that you were playing against. You can't say that you're missing your best player. You can't say that Chris Bell is underachieving. And you can't say that you didn't get any production from your bench. Kyle Cuff gives you 10 points in 14 minutes. This should have, at minimum, be a close game that maybe goes to the wire, and we're talking about how, once again, they can't get it done late. They lose the game by 4 points because X, Y, Z reason. Nope, they lose by 16. They gave up 90 points as a team to Florida State. I'm truly at kind of a loss for words, which, if you are a loyal follower or listener to this podcast and you've been following along for a long time with myself, you know that I like to talk. You know that I'm very opinionated. But it's hard to come up with new things to say about this team. Other than that, they're just not good in any real aspect of the game. Players, coaches included. Did they even try defensively? Like, seriously. 90 points? I can't tell you how many times I had to write in my notes, ex-player on Florida State gets to the rim easily and dunks the ball. Alley-oop. This player is left wide open for a three-pointer and drills it. There was a miscommunication here, and it leads to this player open. I can't even say, well, it happened at this point in the second half. You know I like to do that. I like to tell you, like, at this point in the game, there was this sloppy play. I can give you an example in a second. But honestly, there's so many to count, then why even bother? I can give you one terrible sequence from Jaquan Carlos in the second half, and it was part of the run that Florida State started to go on. It was early in the second half. Syracuse is only down by 4 points, and Jaquan Carlos just throws it. I don't know. He had the worst 30-second sequence of his life. Throws it right to a Florida State player. It leads to an easy points for them. Has another turnover, but luckily, Florida State doesn't capitalize on that possession. But I think that was really the start of the run, if I'm not mistaken. When I look back at my notes, it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. To Autry's credit, at least he took Carlos out after that sequence. And I'm not trying to pin the loss just on Jaquan Carlos, but it really was at the beginning point of the run. They were only down 7. I should correct myself. They were down 7. He has a terrible turnover. It leads to a Florida State dunk, and then they're down by 9. But there's so many of those bad plays that you can't even just put it on Carlos. You have to kind of put it on everyone. This is hard. It's really hard to do. Syracuse basketball loses at Florida State 90-74, even with JJ Starling back, even with Chris Bell finally getting it going. And I guess that might be the only positive of the day. I guess one of two positives. You're not playing the greatest team. Kyle Cuff once again has a decent performance. And the Orange lose by 16 points. What else is new?